Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new and you're stopping by for the first time, welcome. If you guys are watching this, that means that I just had my baby and I threw together 15 Dollar Tree and more Farmhouse fall DIYs. So I hope that you guys enjoy this video. This is a bit longer one since there's so many jam-packed into one video. So with all that being said, let's get to crafting. So for the first one, I had this scrap wood that my husband was going to throw away. I sanded down all the imperfections, and then I had him cut me 3 different sizes. I then took my favorite stain. I usually call it Jacobine, but one of my subscribers had let me know that it's actually called Jacobian, if that's right, but anyway, I stained the middle one, and then I took some white Waverly chalk paint, and I went ahead and I painted the top and the bottom, so the smaller and the larger one. And of course, these are my favorite brushes, so like I said here, I will have these linked in my Amazon favorites because they really are a true lifesaver for time, and they give you a really nice smooth application. So once I had these all painted up, I did go ahead and just set these aside to dry. I did want to mention that I did also paint the sides and everything. So anything that's visible you want to paint. I then just took a piece of sandpaper and I sanded around the edges to make it look a bit more weathered. And I did that on both the white ones. So for the top one, I just freehanded a pumpkin on one side and a snowman on the other. This is going to be a double-sided decor piece, and I was pretty comfortable drawing just a simple pumpkin and a simple little snowman, but if you're not comfortable, then just print one off and trace it. I then just painted it the way that I wanted to with some moss and the brown color. I can't think of the name right this minute. And then I just went in there and put a few little details with some white. So for the fall sign, I took my stencils, and I got these stencils at Walmart, and they're the paper stencils, and I stenciled "Give Thanks" onto the fall side, and then I went in, I love that green color, the Moss by Waverly, so I did just go ahead and I painted over what I traced with the stencil. And I say this all the time, but I don't really like to actually use a dabber to stencil it on because it always ends up running on me. But for the brown that I stained, I put the Norman family for our last name, so you would just put your last name. And then for the Christmas side, I stenciled on Let It Snow with a different font, and then I just colored in my snowman. So to finish this off, I just took a simple jute bow. I glued that to the top of the pumpkin, and then I laid it out just to make sure it was how I wanted it to be, and everything was looking pretty good. And then I just did the same thing for the snowman, and that is it for that project. This is so quick and easy, and you can use it for fall and winter, so I really like that about this piece because it's versatile, and sometimes it can be a lot to switch out decor from season to season, so to be able to just have this out and then switch it over really makes life just a bit easier, especially for a mama like me with a newborn as well as a toddler. So if you guys have not subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would become part of the family. I love to do lots and lots of Dollar Tree DIYs. I love to be able to just put things together that are really cheap and make them look really high end, as well as trash to treasures and like a look for less. So please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy it, and again, please become part of the family. I would love it. I love chatting with you guys in the comments down below. So if you do subscribe, comment in the comment section and let me know that you became part of the family. So for this next project, I had this pumpkin wreath form, and I had seen so many people do so many different things with this, but what I did not see anybody do is do this with the twine. So I wanted to make mine a bit different than everybody else's. So I take this pumpkin form and a big old roll of jute cord. I got that jute cord from Walmart, I believe, for like $5. And then here I'm just trying to figure out which lettering that I wanted. I did get these in a pack from Dollar Tree. I have seen them this year, so definitely pick up a pack. You can use them for so many different things. And I knew that you probably wouldn't be able to see the welcome or whatever wording, so I did just take some ink Waverly chalk paint, and it worked better with this dabber than to try to paint it because it's so shiny. So I just take my dabber and I go over that sign. I then take some moss Waverly chalk paint and some white Waverly chalk paint, and I paint 2 of these with the moss and then 2 of these with the white, just to kind of give it a bit of contrast and switch it up a little bit so it wasn't just all white or all green, and then they kind of run together when you do that, especially the way that I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit them side by side, so I definitely did want them to pop off of the piece and be pretty noticeable. So I started by just taking some hot glue and gluing it to the bottom end of this pumpkin wreath form from Dollar Tree. And I quickly realized that I needed to unravel a bunch, wrap it around my hand so that way I could get it in between, because essentially all we're doing is just weaving this in and out and going back and forth all the way to the top. So this does take a little bit, you guys. I remember doing this project and just being like, oh my god, is it over yet? But I did end up just popping on a show on my iPad and just sitting back watching my show and just doing this. It did take me about an hour, but I do have this decor piece still today, and I think it's definitely worth the time and effort to get such a high-end looking piece. So I just continue to weave that back and forth, and you really don't need to glue it. But once my piece was at the end, I did just glue that, like flip the wreath form around, glue it to the back, unravel some more, and then just glue that end piece to where the last one stopped, if that makes sense. So because jute is so messy, I kept having to clean up every so often. I can't stand all those little flyaways. So once I got to about the middle, I did start from the other end, just because this wreath form is curved, so it kind of wanted to keep sliding down off of that curve. So once I had that like 4th layer done, when I started at the top, I did go in and push it down and then glue it, because as you can see here, it's really full, but the way that it's curved and it kept slipping, it looked like it wasn't curved. Curved. It looked like it wasn't full, so I did just place some hot glue, pull that down as best as I could, and then I knew that I was going to put some fabric on the middle of it anyway, so I just left those empty spaces because you're not going to see it anyway. I clipped some more jute, and then I just wrapped it around the stem, and that way your stem isn't wide open. And so once I get to the end, I do continue to glue around that top piece so that the jute would stay on there. If I'm not making much sense, I probably don't make sense to myself, but you can see what I'm doing here. So once I had that glued down, Then I just take some Truffle Waverly chalk paint and I go over that stem with a couple coats, making sure that none of the jute is shining through. And then I take some of my Waverly wax in the antique and I just go over that just to make it darker. So I had this buffalo check fabric and I just cut a piece and then took the ends, glued it down so that way you have a much nicer, cleaner edge. And I did that on both, and then I laid it in the middle of this pumpkin and I just went around the edges again of the fabric and I just glued that right down to the pumpkin, making sure that it's nice and secured. So after I did that, I decided that I want my welcome to be in that moss color. I thought that it just went better, and then it popped more off of the buffalo check fabric. And then I took my letter stencil from Dollar Tree, and this comes in a wheel, and I just stencil on fall with each of the pumpkins having a letter. I then take some ink Waverly chalk paint and I just dry brush all the way around it, as well as in the middle, again, just to give it some contrast and some dimension. So once I had that all done, I then just took my ink or my black paint pen and I went over all those letters. I made 4 simple bows and then I just glued them down to the top of each of the pumpkins. I then take my welcome sign and I put a bit of hot glue on the back. Be careful, this is metal, so it does get hot once you try to put some hot glue on it. And then I just positioned my pumpkins wherever I wanted them, and I thought that they looked even and nice. And then once I had them where I wanted them, I just went ahead, took some hot glue, and I glued them down as well. I'm so happy with the way this pumpkin turned out. I pulled it out for this season, and it is getting ready to go up here shortly when I decorate. So for the next couple projects, I make this little tiny box for a tiered tray, a tiered tray stand, and then a bigger box just for some floral or some decor. So I took this magnet from Dollar Tree, I glued on one of these little tiny containers, and then I just painted that white, and then that project is done. So that one was quick and easy. Next, I take these skinny sticks and I cut them down to size. I at first cut them in half, so depending on how small or large you want this little mini box, you can cut them down to whichever size that you wanted. Of course, my cuts weren't perfect because I used scissors, so I did just line up the ones that were close enough to the same exact size. So I did 3 on one side, 4 for the bottom piece, and then 3 for the other longer side. I then took some smaller pieces, put some hot glue at first, and then I took some Aleene's tacky glue just because you could see the hot glue through it, and I didn't think that looked too good. But these smaller pieces are just how they're going to be held together. So you want to let these dry. Aleene's tacky glue actually dries pretty quickly. So by the time I had got done gluing all these pieces together, the glue was dry enough to where I could assemble this box. So I just continued that, and I did lay each side next to each other just to be sure that I was gluing them together evenly. And then once I had that done, then I took a piece of the skinny stick, laid it onto the side of what is the bottom of the box, marked it, and then I cut down 6 pieces to size. And then of course I cut a few more pieces to hold these together. So then after that I just assembled it. I glued them all together and then moved on to the bigger box. So for the bigger box, you can use regular popsicle sticks, but you would just have to use a few more to get the height and dimension that you want. and I have a bunch of these large popsicle sticks on hand, so I did just mark it, and I took it to my little mini miter saw, cut those down to size, and then sanded the sides down. I again just cut down pieces for the middle, and then essentially I did the same exact thing that I did for the smaller box, and I did it for the larger box. So I'm just going to put on some music and let this play for you guys so you can see how I did this one.
Look in the mirror, who's looking back at me? I don't know what happened, guess we weren't meant to be. I know we had problems, I thought we could fix them, but we got tired. There's nothing left to do but to say goodbye and try to move on. I'll get over you, only wish that I knew how to go on. Baby, you and me, we're so messed up together. Even if we tried, we'd be stuck here forever. I don't understand right now how to make it through, but I'll get over you, and it's not like I'm gonna hate you. It's what it is, nothing left that we could do. Even though it hurts right now, we will make it through. I'll get over you. I'll get over you.
So once I had all my boxes put together, I took the smaller one and some white Waverly chalk paint, and I just gave that a really good coat of the white. So I did do the entire outside. I did not do the inside because I knew that you wouldn't see it, and then I stained the bigger one with my Jacobian. I then just dry brushed some of the wax, and this was my earlier days, you guys, so you can see how much I've evolved with my dry brushing. I didn't really have the right brush to dry brush back then, so definitely use your chip brush if you have one, or even just a paintbrush that's kind of like all messed up. That works really well too. So once I did the dry brushing with some antique wax, I then took a small piece of jute twine and I glued that to the inside on one side of the box as well as on the other side of the box, just to make these kind of look like handles. I don't know if that step is really necessary, but if you like it, you can go for it, but you don't really see it too much when it's on your tier tray, so again, it's a personal preference. And for the larger box, I did the exact same thing, dry brushing with some white Waverly chalk paint and then taking some thicker jute twine and making two handles on each side, and I do glue those down with some hot glue. So now to just decorate it, I just put a little tin can in there with some greenery, some cotton stems, and then I had these pumpkin picks from Dollar Tree and I stuck those in the bigger box. And then for the smaller box, I just took some random clippings of the greenery as well as like a little baby gourd and a little baby pumpkin, and I decorated that one that way. So of course, you can leave this empty or fill it all with mini pumpkins. Totally up to you. I guess it just depends what kind of decor you have on your tiered tray. So for the next project, we're going to be doing this pumpkin patch sign, and this was another one of my favorites from last year. You guys, I can never pick like which one is my absolute favorite, but I definitely always have like a few favorites, and this is definitely one of them. And this kind of got my sign making journey started. Everybody loved this sign and wanted more signs, so I definitely attribute my sign making journey to this pumpkin sign. So I started with one of these square pictures that you can get from Dollar Tree. I have seen this same one this year, and I always pick up a few when I see them just because I can use them all year round. If you guys have been around lately, then you know that I've been using Christmas signs from last year, so definitely pick a bunch up when you see them. So as usual, we get our border started, or our frame, and I take my square dowel. These are always linked in my Amazon favorites. They're one of my most used products, so definitely pick you up a pack of these, and they last a pretty long time because you get 3-foot sections and 10 pieces of them, so you can definitely do so many projects with these. But I just lay my square dowel down, I mark it on either side where it's gonna stop on the sign as well as the square dowel, and then take another piece, line it up, mark it, and then go to my little mini miter saw, which again, if you've been around, then you have seen me use this multiple times. That is also linked down in my Amazon favorites. It's definitely a crafter's one of my best tools that I use, so definitely a good thing to have in your craft stash. And then of course I take my favorite brush, again linked in my Amazon favorites, and some white Waverly chalk paint, and I give that a really nice coat. And you definitely want to let this dry in between coats, especially with chalk paint, because when you try to be like me and be impatient, I always want to hurry up and get that second coat on, then you're going to pull the paint off, and then it just looks uneven and doesn't look very good. So again, definitely either use a blow dryer to dry that first coat, or you could pop it in the oven at 150 for a few minutes and get that nice and dry, and then go ahead and do your second coat. So I printed off this from the internet, and this is that pumpkin patch sign, and you're going to see in a little bit how I use it for this, as well as break it up into a few different projects. But essentially, as usual, I just take my graphite paper and I trace on everything except that middle pumpkin. You pick homegrown piece of it, because I'm not going to use all of that. So for this sign in particular, I just trace the pumpkin patch, 10 cents a pound, the arrow, and then I move the you pick down where I want it, and then I trace that on and take my black paint pen and then go over whatever I traced. And then as you can see on the printed copy, the pumpkin patch and all the wording had like a white line into it, so I just went in with my white paint pen. I left it right next to me. I left the printed copy right next to me, and then wherever I saw those little shadow lines, I did go in and I went over those, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this at first, but once I did a few letters, I was really happy that I did it, because it does look really, really good. So I just took one of those ornaments from Dollar Tree, the pumpkin ornaments, spray painted that silver, and then I take my elephant Waverly chalk paint as well as the white Waverly chalk paint, a really messed up brush. At first I tried to do it with a makeup sponge, but I just wasn't too happy with the way that it looked, so I set that aside. Again, these were my earlier days before I found a better way to do this, so I was trying all different things. I tried a dabber. I did not like that too much, but I did just end up using that for most of it, and then going in with a really messed up brush that was all frayed out and finishing that elephant Waverly chalk paint. And you just kind of want to dab that all around. It tones that silver down, and then you go in with your white, and that's what makes it look galvanized, because on galvanized metal you have those pieces that really stand out, and that's what the white does for you. I then just took some ink Waverly chalk paint on the end of a little brush, and I just went around those edges just to give it some dimension and make it pop off of the sign. If you guys hear that noise, I'm sorry. My air keeps going on and off. I don't know what is going on with it. So if you hear that static, I apologize for that. But it is 100 degrees here, so I definitely need my air, being that I'm set to give birth. Again, I'm doing this voiceover before I give birth, but if you see it, I've already had her. But I definitely, needless to say, I definitely need my air on right now. So I hope you guys don't mind. And again, I apologize for that noise if it feels a little annoying. But so I just keep going around the edges until I'm satisfied. I then just went back in with some more and touched it up. I painted the stem with some Truffle Waverly chalk paint. I don't think that step was really very necessary, because even looking at the sign today, my eyes don't go directly to the stem anyway. So once I had the stem done, then I just glued the pumpkin down, and I glued that right in between the U-pick and the pumpkin patch. Glued down the frame. And I always start with like the top part, and then I work down the sides to make sure that the frame fits nicely, and then do the bottom, and I do just glue that with some hot glue. I made a raffia bow with a few pieces, just so that way the bow was nice and thick, and I glued that down with some hot glue, and that completes that project. Again, I love this sign so much. I did pull that out again for this year. And on to the next project. So last year, not many people could find these little mini houses. So I wanted to show you guys how to make your own mini houses if you can't find them. I found a bunch again this year, so I'm all stocked up. But if you can't find them, don't feel left out, because I'm going to show you how to do that. So I will try to leave the measurements down below, but basically what I did was just trace out mine onto some foam board, and I took the ones at the time I had were already glued together, so I just laid them down, took my ruler, and I put a line where they would be, where each house would like stop and start, if that makes sense. And then I measured all the sides. I took some of these small stir sticks, and I just took my tape measure, and I took all the pieces, measured them out, and then I took them to my little mini miter saw, cut those pieces all the way, or all out, and then took my sander and just sanded the edges. So I will say that I wish I could do angles at the time. I'm going to try to learn, but at the time I didn't. So these didn't fit perfectly, but honestly, once I painted them and put them up as my decor, you could not tell the imperfections. So if you're good at angles, then definitely angle them. But I just laid each of the pieces down after I measured and cut them out onto each of the houses, so I knew which pieces went where. And then I just took some hot glue on the edge, and I just glued them all together. So I do that, and I repeat that for every single one. And as you could see on the one that I just did, it is not anywhere near perfect, but again, once you have them painted, you really can't tell. So for this one, I just paint the entire thing white with some white Waverly chalk paint. I paint another one of these pumpkins with some moss Waverly chalk paint, and I do give this a really good coat. And then once I painted this pumpkin, I did just take some white on the end of my brush, and I just kind of gave that a bit of dimension, just so that way this pumpkin didn't look so plain. So for the second house, I painted this with some elephant Waverly chalk paint, and as I always say, that's the beauty about DIY. If you guys want to change this up to suit your decor, you can change the color, change the decoration you use. It's just totally up to you, and that's why I love DIY. So for the third one, I do go ahead and paint that entire thing black with some ink Waverly chalk paint. You can use acrylic paint if you want, it just takes longer to dry. And then for the white one, I just went around that edge and I painted that black. I then just glued down that pumpkin to the middle, and if this was now, I would definitely dry brush that, but this was back then, so you live and you learn. I then just glued this harvest sign down, and I did paint that when I did my pumpkin wreath form, and I just had it sitting there, so I did just want to use it. So just dab that with some black if you like, to make the wording stand out some more. So for the gray one, I had this little stencil, Bless Our Nest, and I honestly cannot remember where I got it. These are the adhesive stencils, and I like these much better because your project doesn't run as much. So when you pull it up, it's nice and crisp. I took some white Waverly chalk paint around the edge. And then I just took some greenery. I believe I got this from Walmart. And I just glued that all the way around that circle to make it look like a little wreath. And then I took some of these berries from the greenery and I just go ahead and glue those down as well, just to give it a bit more decoration and make it look more finished. So that project is done. Once I had that one done, I took some more of this buffalo check fabric. I just drew a simple pumpkin. It's not the prettiest pumpkin in the world. Next time I'll probably trace the ornament from Dollar Tree and then cut that out because I think it's a nicer shape. So I cut 2 pieces of this buffalo check fabric just to make it a bit more thick because it is a thin fabric. I cut that pumpkin out and then just took some jute twine and I created a stem, glued that down with some hot glue, and then took my white paint pen and went onto the fabric onto the picture, and I just freehanded Blessed Beyond Measure. And then that was it for those. Next up, these 3 signs, and again, I really love these signs. A lot of you guys that have been with me from the beginning love these signs as well. So essentially I just picked up 3 of these little wall hangings from Dollar Tree. I believe they're like you hang it on the wall and then hang something from these little hooks, or maybe it's just decoration. I'm not really sure, but I start by taking those little hooks off at the bottom. You can use a screwdriver, but I have a drill, so I just cut the time down and used my drill. I took some Moss Waverly chalk paint as well as this cream colored acrylic paint. I'm not exactly too sure what it's called. I believe it's called Marshmallow, but I just gave that a really nice coat with those 2 colors kind of mixed in. Not all the way, but I wanted this to have like hints of green and hints of a different color instead of just being a solid color, if that makes sense. So for this next sign, I did mostly the marshmallow color, and then whatever green was left in my brush, I just used that. I wipe my brush off for the next one, use this tan color as the main color, and then I do go in with some of that Moss Waverly chalk paint and give that some streaks of that as well. And I like to do this while this is wet just because it gives it a different look and it makes it nice and even instead of having like really thick lines of a different color, if that makes sense. But After this one was dry, I felt that it was a bit too green, so I do go in with some Waverly chalk paint and some of the moss on the end of my brush. And you can see here I kind of just dab it, and then I go in and I kind of blend that together. And I'm really loving the way that that turned out. And then, so leaving that cream colored on my brush, I do just give this second color a nice coat of the moss with the white shining through. For the tan, I put a little bit more tan down, and then I brush that through with some of the Moss Waverly chalk paint, because I did want these to look like a set. I just didn't want them to look exactly alike. I'm sorry, you guys, I did not use the moss. I used some nutmeg, I believe this color is. And if I wrote it down in the picture, but if you're not following me on Instagram, the information is down below. I would love to see your guys' recreations, and definitely go on there, add me, and then tag me if you make any of these signs. So I just take a pencil and I go around every single one of these edges just to give it a bit more character, I guess you can say. I thought that maybe the edges might be a little bit too plain. So for the first project, I take this picture again. I told you that I was going to show you how to break this picture up and use it in a few different ways. So I just take this pumpkin and I took a piece of scrapbook paper in a faux wood color, and then I take this pumpkin and my graphite paper and I just trace that on there. I then just cut that out and I go over the edges with my black paint pen. This one is from Walmart. I then take my glue stick and I just go ahead and glue the whole back of this pumpkin. I like to use a glue stick because it doesn't bubble up as much. Some of my subscribers told me to just wet whatever I'm using if I'm using Mod Podge, and that should help your wrinkles. So if you have a problem with wrinkles, then maybe try that method. I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but I will try that in the future. So here, if you guys are new, you've never seen my bow trick, so I figured that I would slow this clip down and show you. This one isn't as great of a clip, so later on at the end of the video in a different project, I do show you, and I think it's a little bit easier to see. But I will show you guys a couple times so that way you can see it a few different ways, and whichever clip you think is easiest for you to follow, then you can stop and play that back a few times and follow along and try, because once you get it, it's so easy to make a perfect bow. So once I had my bow all done, then I clip off the ends, and then I start in the middle with the middle letter, and I just trace on with this letter stencil, harvest, and then go over those letters with a little bit of white just to give it some shadow. And then I just made a simple design at the bottom. You could take it or leave it, maybe put some greenery down there. It's totally up to you. And then just take some hot glue and glue our bow down. So for this green little sign, I do just freehand a pumpkin on there. Not the best, you guys. I'm not the best drawer in the world, but you get the picture. So if you're not comfortable, again, if you're not comfortable drawing a pumpkin, print one off and then just trace it on with your graphite paper. So I did just take that same printout and I traced onto the top of the pumpkin you pick, and then I took my letter stencil and I just put homegrown underneath. And so when I went around the edge of this sign with my black paint pen, I forgot to mention I did that as well. Some ran through, so I just touched it up with some of the moss. I glued a jute bow to the top, and then that project was done. So for this last project, the white one, I do just trace on the top of this printout, and then I move the 10 cents a pound up so that it all fit together nicely. And then again, I went over the shadowing with this white paint pen and went around the edges with my black paint pen. And I just love this technique, you guys. It's so cheap and easy to just print something off and then trace it on and go over it with some paint pens. It looks so high end. It looks like it was printed off with a printer. So I suggest just taking your time when you're tracing and then going over it with your paint pen, because that's how you get the most control and that's how you make it look so professional. If I were to just rush through these, they'd look all sloppy. So I do definitely take my time, and I pride myself in my work. So I always want it to look good for you guys. But I just screw those little handles on, and then those are done. So for this next project, I got these towels from Walmart, and I had the intention on hanging them up in my kitchen, but my couch was missing a little something. I had 2 pillows on each side and it needed something in the middle. So basically I just took these tea towels and I folded them in half, flipped them over, and then I just took a bead of hot glue down the sides and I glued those sides together, just making sure that each and every piece of that side is glued down, because if you have like one little piece where the glue skipped or something, if that makes sense, you will have your fuzz poke through. So definitely just make sure that it's glued really nicely. I then just flip that right side out, and I had some stuffing from an old pillow. These ugly pillows came with my couch and I hated them, so I didn't want to just throw them out. So that is the fuzz that I'm using, but it's cheaper to just buy a cheap pillow from like Walmart and use the stuffing out of it than to go and purchase stuffing. I'm sorry, you guys, I cannot talk. I have not talked this much in such a long time. But I then just glued the bottom down, and then I did the same thing for the buffalo check towel. And I am so in love with these little mini signs. I think it's really cool that you can take such cheap towels. Like that pack of towels was $2, and then I had this stuffing. So I made some really nice looking pillows for $2. So last but not least, I made this little guy last year, and I'm not really into like Halloween. I like more of just like fall decor, but I am really impressed with the way this little guy turned out, because he definitely fit all my decor and he doesn't look too much Halloween but too much like regular fall, if that makes sense. So he's kind of a mix in between. Anyway, I drilled some holes into his hands. Originally, I had painted the entire thing black. You'll see in a little bit that I end up changing this up, but I just cut a piece of burlap ribbon. Definitely always check clearance after Christmas. They have the best like decorations and ribbons for really cheap. I got this entire roll of burlap ribbon for $0.25 last year at Dollar General. So I just took a piece and I cut out triangles because we're going to make a banner. And then I took the piece that I had already cut and lined it up and cut 2 more pieces. So you need 3 pieces altogether. If you want to make a bigger word, then you have to cut smaller pieces. But we're just going to stencil on Boo, and I obviously did each letter on one of the pieces, if that makes sense. And for that, I did actually stencil that on, just because burlap is kind of hard to write on. So I did just take a dabber and I stenciled that on. I took a few unfinished wood beads, and I will link these down below if they're not already there in my Amazon favorites, because I use these all the time as well. And I put 4 beads on a piece of jute cord spaced apart. I then just held it down with 2 bottles of paint so that I could get it nice and evenly. And then the part where the wire is on the ribbon, I do just run a bead of hot glue down that, and then glue that down to my jute. Now, I figured out later on it's easier to glue underneath where the wire is on the ribbon, so I do just glue that down. So here, as I said, I decided to galvanize this ghost. So definitely skip the painting him black, spray paint him, or paint him silver, and then I go in with a messed up brush. I would suggest to use a natural sponge. That is what I've been using lately, and it just turns out so much better. But if you don't have that, again, if you have a frayed brush, that will work okay. So go over that with the Elephant Waverly chalk paint to tone that silver down, and then go back in with your white Waverly chalk paint, and you want to do the white a little bit lighter than the elephant. If you go a little bit crazy, then you just go back in with your elephant and you touch that up. But it's to personal preference, so just keep looking at your piece, and how you like it is the best way I can describe to do it. There's no rhyme or reason to this galvanizing technique. I just do a little bit, look at it, and then go in the spots where I think it needs more, and then if it needs a little bit less, then I do go in and touch that up. I then just take my ink Waverly chalk paint, and again I just dry brush all the way around this ghost. A lot of galvanized metal is kind of dark on the edges, so I really like the way that this ghost came out. I did do around his mouth and his eyes, and then I put a hanger back on the top. So this is the second time I'm going to show you this bow, so it's really hard to explain. I'm not even going to try to waste my breath explaining, so just watch. And if this isn't slow enough for you, I slowed it down as much as I humanly possibly could. So if it's not slow enough for you, on my video, in the right hand corner there will be 3 dots. If you click those 3 dots, then in the drop down menu there will be an option to slow this down even more. And if you need to rewind it a few times and watch it over and over and over just to get it down, then no big deal. Definitely do that, because once you have this bow trick down, I promise you, you will not regret knowing how to do it. It just makes it look so much more professional. And then if you have to do multiple bows, they come out nice and uniform. So that's why I love this technique. So next, after I have my bow made for his little neck, I guess you can say, I then just take my little banner and I slide it through the holes that I made in his hands. I tie it in the back, and then I cut off the excess. So that is it for this video, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got a bunch of decorating ideas. Please let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've joined the family, and I am so excited to chat with you guys. Let me know which one was your favorite. I always ask that just because I'm so curious to know. But anyway, guys, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys soon. Bye.